So here's the reality. 62% of every business in Australia is a sole trader, which means it's really hard to grow those businesses and to scale them and make them a saleable asset down the line. Today, according to the 5th of November report in the Telegraph, 60% of every young person now wants to be an entrepreneur, a business owner. Can you believe that? So what's going to happen? More and more people are going to enter the market. The number of businesses which are now in the marketplace are double since the Olympics, which for someone my age feels like yesterday. And so it is that bankruptcies this year have gone up by 10.8% up until the March quarter compared to last year. And here's the reality. There's 137,000 startups every day start in the world, and 120,000 startups go broke. That's 88%. But the numbers in Australia are significantly worse. In fact, we have the highest failure rate of startups in the world. 97.3% of startups fail to get any funding. 95% of startups that even do get some funding, they still fail. And so the reality is that 99% of startups in Australia don't make it. And I'll tell you some of the reasons for that, okay, which is one of the reasons why I designed, after being in business for 35 years, a business ownership 2-day course, which I'll tell you a little bit about shortly. And we have a StartCon subsidy for that course, which is being run next weekend, by the way. You know, the two primary causes for business failure are cash flow and not being able to sell stuff. But apart from that, 76% of all business failure is caused through a lack of knowledge, business knowledge, of the entrepreneur. 76%. And here's the thing. After people go into business, this has always done my head in. I don't know why we go into business. We're really good at what we do. You know, the guy that's down the front flying the aircraft, I want to make sure he's got his qualifications. I want to make sure he's done his hours. I'm not going to go to the GP to operate on my brain, right? But I want those guys to be highly qualified. But in business, you can go into business with no qualifications at any age, no regulation, no sanctioning, zero. So we come out really good at what we do in our craft, our trade, whatever it might be it a doctor, dentist, accountant, lawyer, but we don't have any qualifications in owning a business. So I've rectified that, and I'll tell you more about that at the end. But here's the thing. Once you go into business, only 5% of entrepreneurs take up any startup business training. 5%. And of those, only 3% implement what they learn anyway. So the reason I'm telling you this is because you need, if you're going to talk about bootstrapping, and we're going to talk about saving money and, you know, saving up for your startup and perhaps funding your side hustle, you've got to look at the core issues. You can't just look at this from the point of view of saving a penny. There's more to it than that. There's a lot of psychology behind it as well. Okay, so a quick question for you guys. How many people here have a day job and are running a business as a side hustle? Can I have a show of hands, please? Cool. And how many SMEs do we have in the audience? People who have been in business for more than 2 years, SMEs? And how many people here are thinking about going into business for themselves? Hands up? Okay, so we've got a very big mixed bag. Fantastic. All right, so a little bit about myself. Given that you haven't heard about me from the book, because I wasn't in the book, I've been in business for 35 years. I've founded 7 companies, and I've started 35 businesses. My record stands at about $330 million in revenue in my own businesses, and I'm the founder of Innovest SME, having employed more than 1,000 staff. One of my latest JV ventures is an artificial intelligence business that's in its infancy, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a second. So don't forget to make sure that you get a copy of Business Successful Life. It's a really good book. Okay, so I just want to plant another seed with you. Now we've gone over the dunny roll, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about a person that can save only $10 per week. That's it, $10. And I want you to contrast that with a person that can save $100 per week. Okay, because when we talk about money, we have to talk about time. And time is more important than money. So what is the speed with which the person who makes 100 can reach their objective compared to the person who can save 10? It's 10 times more, right? Now I want you to think that you can save $1,000 a week. You either pump it into your side hustle, you're funding losses in the first couple of years, or you're saving up all this money to get what you need in order to launch this thing. And don't tell me it can't be done, because it can be. In the 80s, I was making $3,000 a week as a DJ part-time, which was a hell of a lot more than I was making in a week as an engineer, right? So I was pumping $2,000 to $3,000 a week into my side hustle at that point in time, and I didn't flick the switch until I was making 4 times as much in my side hustle than what I was in my full-time day job. Now, if you do flick the switch too early, you have a 33% chance less of surviving. Okay? So, think about time. I call this the 10x factor. I mean, you can become a millionaire very quickly, or actually very slowly, by putting $10 in the bank at 8% compound interest, and for the next 40 years do that, $10 a day, that'll end up making you a millionaire. And if you leave it there, 14 years later, that 1 million will become 2 million. But that'll take you 54 years to get there. I mean, the break-even point for an MBA, ordinarily speaking, can you hear me down the back? We're back, no, is 12 years. 12 years is the average worldwide break-even for a person that goes down the MBA path, compared to, for example, someone like tradespeople now making more money than white-collar people when they graduate from uni. Can you believe that? A social and financial audit. All right, so what do I mean by that? The point that I've written there in red, it's very hard to go bust if you're not reliant upon the profits from your startup or the blunders you may make in the first couple of years if you've got a 6-figure salary. So, for example, if you're on a 6-figure salary and you're outsourcing to somebody at $6 an hour in the Philippines, for $12,500 Australian, you could have a full-time, very highly qualified, well-spoken, reliable internet, reliable power in the Philippines working for you while you're saving up to make your side hustle become a very successful venture. Don't flick the switch too early, excuse me. So, I'll give you an example. Imagine someone's pulling beer, or they're doing coffee, $20 an hour net. Is that reasonable? Net. So most people, they go out and buy the $100 pair of shoes, the $100 shirt, the $100 pair of pants. They got $300 in the gear that they're wearing, because that's the way that most people go about it, right? That's equal to 15 hours on your back. Now, the sacrifices that you could make, such as, for example, the suit that I'm wearing, which my wife hates me talking about, it's my favorite suit. Most people say to me, it's worth about $500 or $1,000. I bought it for $5. It's a $5 suit, and it fits me better than any suit I've ever had tailored. Where do you think I got it from? I got it from a garage sale. Now, why do I have to go and buy a suit for $1,000 when I'm looking at one that I can buy for $5? That's $995 that's going to go into my business. You get it? The average person, I mean, I go to 7-Eleven in the morning and I see them go and buy 2 cans of Red Bull, packet of cigarettes. Then they get the $15 takeaway lunch. You do the maths on that, it's about an average of $20,000. That, over 2 years, would pay for a university degree or get a business up and running. Okay? Just hold those thoughts. Very quickly, moneysavingexpert.com is the European version of what we have called moneysavingaussie.com.au. That will give you a lot of resources and ideas on how it is so you don't need to live from paycheck to paycheck, week to week, as it were. Okay, moneysavingaussie.com.au. Here's an example. Now, this is one of the subjects that we teach. I've done law at Sydney University. I did engineering at the UTS in the 80s, so I'm a bit of a dinosaur in that respect. But, this is not Naomi Simpson's fault. This happens to everybody. But 4 complaints were made to the ACCC about her overcharging, her business overcharging 0.3 of 1% on surcharge on a credit card. I spoke to some guys yesterday that were startups. They'd never heard of the ACCC. They've never dealt with a lawyer. They've never heard of the Department of Fair Trading. That's a $43,200 hit. Now imagine that you saved $500 a week for 2 years, 50 grand to get your business off the ground through sacrificing and bootstrapping, and then you, the minute you start, get hit with a $43,000 fine. You're screwed from the get-go, okay? So you need to know this stuff, all right? Here's another idea, just a mindset thing, right? When you go to buy something, like we buy a bottle of water, we pay $3, $4, $5 for a bottle of water. Buy the big 24 lot for $7 or $9 and buy it through the business, and then every bottle will be costing you 30 cents, but it's going to be tax deductible. So whatever you buy now, if you're going into business, think about it from the point of view, can I make that a tax deduction? Okay, and have some fun with the garage sales, they're good. This was my first $1 million company in the 80s, okay? You can see it's exponential growth, yeah? Look at the curve on the bottom. That's the net profitability of this business. You'll see, year 2, 3, 4, 5, I break even year 5. I was working 100-hour weeks minimum in this business. I was an idiot. There was no resilience. I had no built-in contingency plan. I was completely underinsured. If I had gotten sick in this business, that business would have fell over. And that's almost what happened in the recession that we had to have in 1990. Boom, turnover dropped by 70%. I then came to my senses. I regrouped. I had to close down shops, let staff go. And then I started the business with the core value of what it was providing in the entertainment industry, and look what happens to the bottom line. It then goes up by using the lessons I learned in the 80s and the early 90s. I'm retaining 30 cents in the dollar. So I'm turning over a fraction of what I'm turning over in the 80s, but now with that money, I started 2 new companies. And those companies still run today, turning over $10 and $20 million per year. And now we're up to 330. So don't do what I did, okay? There's a way to prevent that from happening. Okay, what do I mean by don't get lost in marketing? A lot of people are spending a lot of their time. I mean, you can't manage what you don't measure. So we spend a lot of time on social media, answering questions, joining all these groups, going back and forth. But are we really valuing our time? The number one industry category that comes to us for help to grow their business, anyone got an idea what that might be? It's marketing businesses, Facebook agencies, digital marketers. They are the number one client that we have that come to us to help us grow their businesses because they haven't got a clue. And yet they're the people that we tend to go to get them to help us grow our business. So the principle, if I just go back to that curve, is don't focus on revenue. Focus on cash and cash flow. And remember that profits is not cash. It takes time for profits to become cash. And I didn't get that in the 80s, despite the fact that I studied accounting at university. So that's what I mean by marketing. Be very careful where you spend your marketing dollar. Make sure you measure your conversion, your closing ratio averages, and everything you do in marketing, and so you spend your money wisely, whatever you've got. Outsourcing. If you're not outsourcing, you're not in the game. In the future, that's the way it's going to go. You can easily get people for $3 an hour over there. You can get really good quality master's qualified accountants for $15 an hour. Out here, you'll pay a bookkeeper $80 plus an hour to do basic back-end work. You've got to outsource. So we've got a guy in outsourcing. It's one of the subjects that I teach in the business ownership course next weekend. By the way, it's $200. It's meant to be $1,000. Which should be $3,000 or $4,000. We've got a $1,000 ticket price on it. We have an 80% subsidy, StartCon subsidy on it, for for next weekend. If we book out, we're going to do it the weekend after. It's Saturday, Sunday. It's really hard. It's around 18 hours of hard work, and there's 10 primary subjects. There's a brochure over there. On the inside back cover, it has a summary of the 10 primary topics that you ought to be able to master in order to run a successful business regardless, okay? So just think about those topics for your own business regardless of what you do. Outsourcing is not an option, pretty much. Now I'm going to skip past these. I'll send you the resources. There's a whole heap of these that we have. These are tech tools. They're either free or they're very cheap. So I'm just going to flick past all of those in relation to websites, images, making videos and so forth. Expenses. I'll give you some ideas around that. So, for example, the cheapest SIM card on the market is the Aldi SIM card. All our mobile phones in our company run on the Aldi SIM card. They're up to 80% cheaper than the majors, okay? VoIP. All our phones are VoIP. They're up to 50 to 60% cheaper than normal landlines, per se. Another one is, let's take your processes. If something is a process, 30 to 40% of processes can be automated. So think about how you can automate them, okay? Now, when we talk about bootstrapping, we tend to raise the subject of how to get money in the first place. Now, I spend a lot of time on this on my 2-day course, but I'll just touch base on a couple of. I mean, look, 66% of every SME does not own a home. So I don't know what the number is for startups, but I'm imagining it's going to be in excess of 90%. So if you don't own a home, forget the banks. They're not going to lend you dough anyway. And even if you're borrowing money and you have a home and it's for business, the banks aren't keen on that regardless, okay? And they'll take up 2 or 3 months of your time and you'll still get what is a 74% rejection rate, okay? 57% of every SME at any point in time is looking to raise money to help them with working capital. They're the numbers and they're indisputable, all right? So crowdfunding, it's hard, it takes time, but the good thing about crowdfunding is it will give you good feedback and market validation, all right? Angels bring with them usually a particular set of skill sets. Startup incubator, that's what we're one of them. There's plenty downstairs as well. So we take, for example, equity in some businesses. We don't do it very often because we have to have a lot of faith in the investability of the entrepreneur and the business model. But that's an option, and we call that sweat equity. And we also have a co-working space and so forth, and it works out at like $5.50 a day. Friends with deep pockets, just make sure it's in writing and you've got a proper contract. Okay, if you need help with that, you want a lawyer that's going to do the business for you very cheaply, come and see us. Credit unions, do your own due diligence, better than the banks, but you can look it up on Google. Government support, so grants, for example. A guy just got a $264,000 grant to build an off-road electric scooter, of all things. So if you can get a grant for that, I put to you, look, I'm actually running an on-site training course, well, it's more to do with coaching, for a software firm. And they turn over $20 million a year. And the fee to have me go there and do that was 50% subsidized by the government. Okay, alternative lenders, that's probably the most interesting on the list for most of us. The thing about alternative lenders, and there's about 50 of them, is that you're going to have a smaller time frame. It's usually 6 to 12 months, and you will have a much higher interest rate. But you can get the money in the bank within 24 hours, and it's pretty easy to get it. All right, so, okay, what do I mean by becoming investable? Anyone got any ideas? Sorry if I'm talking too quickly. Yes? Being able to sell. Thank you. You've just stole my thunder because that was in my cheat notes. So, you've got to be able to sell. And to be able to sell, you need to be a good negotiator. You need to know the art of persuasion and all sorts of stuff. We run through all of that in our 2-day thing. But here's the thing. If you can sell things more often and faster, and you can increase your prices. Okay, so salesmanship and being really good at it is not an option. What's another example? If you're not investable and your business model is investable, then thirdly, no one's going to give you any money. So it's no good if the business is good, but you're, you know, the entrepreneur or the angel or VC hasn't got the confidence in you, okay? But the business is good and you're not, or vice versa. They've both got to be on the money. Okay, tax. Now, by the way, we're on the video, so just a disclaimer. No legal advice, financial advice, or business advice today. Got to do your own due diligence, all right? But I recommend that if you can incorporate, do so. Why? Because you've got a 28.5% tax rate. And if you look at the personal rates, which are up there on the screen, I know there's lots of slides. I'll send these to you if you like. Therefore, you're going to save a lot of money on tax. And the second reason that you incorporate is what? Who can tell me? To limit your liability. So there's two good reasons, and there's a lot more, by the way. Scaling too early. If you scale prematurely, you have a 20 times less opportunity of scaling fast. Does that make sense? If you don't scale properly, you will not be able to grow at the speed which you ought to. And this is the thing. Most startups think they've got their building blocks sorted. They think that they've got all of their IP, if you will, in the leveraging area, which is normally year 2 to 5 sorted, and then they jump straight to scaling. And look at the numbers. 74% of high-growth internet startups fail due to premature scaling, and 93% of startups that scale prematurely never get past $100,000 a month. So scaling, knowing when to scale is very important. Time, I'm not going to talk much about that. I'll say two things very quickly because that's a 1.5 hour session next on our course. Two things. The average Aussie spends 10 to 15% of their time looking for stuff. Okay? Secondly, the second point I want to make about time is communication skills. That company I told you about, the software firm, they told me that if they implemented the communication strategies which I showed them over those 3 3-hour sessions, that their bottom line would have at least doubled. They were keeping 5 cents in the dollar out of 20 mil. That's a mil on the bottom. That's an extra 1 million. So they'd be keeping 2 million out of 10 cents on the dollar simply by making less mistakes. It's great if your revenue, for example, doubles from this year compared to last year. My first startup, it went from 20,000 in the first year to $1 million by year 6. My next business that had exponential growth went from $250,000 in the first year in 95 after I sold that other business, and it was sitting on 10 million plus by year 5. That's exponential growth. And that's very, very dangerous. That's with no acquisition mergers, no partners, no loans, no nothing. That's just organic. And how do you fund growth? Okay, most businesses that go broke, 66% of them that go broke were profitable. And I'll show you that slide in a second. So if you're doubling your sales, but your expenses are going up at a disproportional rate, say 300% compared to last year, 200%, you could end up in a scenario where you're suffering from a thing what's called net variable negative cash flow. Okay? Now, your accountants don't know much about that. Do we have any accountants in the audience? We love accountants. We went through this last time when you came to the other meeting I did, yeah? Okay. So we love them, but they're dream takers. So you've got to be careful where you get your advice from because you do need accountants and you do need lawyers. But these guys, you know, if you keep going to them and get all your advice, you'll never get off the ground. They're good at what they do. Okay, but the thing is, net variable cash flow, you need to know if you're positive or negative, and there's a way to do that. And so therefore, appreciate the difference between profits and cash. They are different animals, okay? So here's an example. You can go to entrepreneur.com. There's a free resource there, which is a cash flow calculator. Now, if you punch the numbers in, and I've done it with this particular example, you'll see the red, by the way, is cash. The green is profits. Now, there's a business which has been profitable every month of the year. But look what happens after, in month 1, we've gone from cash sales to providing credit. Our cash drops. We're not going to get paid for 60, 90 days, and that number is expanding in Australia, by the way. And so for the first 8 months, how did that business fund its operations? It means that the business owner didn't pay himself. It means that they had a big slush fund sitting there somewhere, a sinking fund to keep pulling money, or it's a side hustle business. The guy's making 250 grand in his day job and he's pumping it in there. I worked with a guy that owns, actually I didn't, he went broke. I was going to work with him. He owned a gymnasium. He was a doctor making $250,000 a year, and his gym was losing $2,000 a week. He only had to work 3 days a week for that salary. What do you think happened? He signed a lease for 3 years for $2 grand a week, and he was losing $100,000 a year. So the only reason he was going to work was to fund the losses of his business, and in his local area, he had 12 competitors in the same space. So just think about that. Here's the old school. This is the typical accounting route. You know, it's like a balance sheet. It's revenue less expenses equals bottom line. Great. You need to do that. You need to keep an eye on your P&L. But that's old school. What I'm going to ask you to do is think about focusing on the new way of looking at P&L. And that's by focusing on your 5 revenue variables. Okay? Noting that there are no strategies to find customers. There's only strategies to find leads through marketing. Okay, now through your sales process, if you can convert those leads into a customer, happy days. Multiply that by the number of times they transact and the amount of money they spend, and that's equal to your revenue. Take away your margin, that's your GP, take away your expenses, and you end up with your bottom line. Make sense? Now, I just put some numbers around that. If you were to, now let's say this business here is making $23,000 on the bottom, okay, if you improve those 5 revenue variables by 10% and you take 10% out of your expenses, you'll end up with an increase of 760% on your bottom line from $23,000 to $176,000. And that's very easily doable with most businesses. Okay, now I can send you a copy of this calculator and the net variable cash flow calculator as well. So essentially that's leverage. Now this is I'll send you a copy of this. There's over 600 strategies that you can use to pull up to grow your business, and depending on where your cash flow is, negative, positive, this chart will tell you where to go to get your resources from. Okay, so it's very powerful. Cash flow forecast, you should be doing it every week, 3 months out, and you ought to make sure that it's, I'll send you a template, that on the bottom, or somewhere rather, you have your opening and closing bank balance so that you can keep an estimate of what's happening in the bank, because cash doesn't lie. You've either got it or you don't have it.